Good morning from here. It's 3:30 in the morning. I want to cover my presentation in two parts. First part, very briefly, I want to quickly summarize Sheldon Pollock's claims for the chronology of both Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then spend significant time on looking at the evidence, the internal evidence from both Ramayana and Mahabharata, and how we can objectively test it to possibly determine the exact timing of these epics, but more crucial, setting and asserting a lower limit on the timing for the events of both Ramayana and Mahabharata. So the first part, a quick summary of what Sheldon Pollock thinks for the chronology of these epics. He assigns 150 BCE for Ramayana, and that is for the text of Ramayana, and he assigns 200 BCE for the text of Mahabharata. Now, what is interesting is that he is very much aware of the problem of any self-evident claim, and rightfully so. And he calls other people out frequently when he thinks the claim is made in a self-evident fashion. Interestingly, when it comes to chronology, that is the exact approach he uses. And then he embellishes it with few other equally irrational means. For example, a very common one is absence of evidence, and he treats that as evidence of absence. For example, if the manuscript doesn't exist beyond a certain timeline, then he considers that is the time limit after which Ramayana or Mahabharata took place or its text came into being. There are many other assumptions, and I would encourage all of you to read my paper in the original when it does come out in the proceedings. But there are some other questionable assumptions that he takes it for granted, and I'll mention one, which is AIT and its timing of 1500 BCE. And then he uses that to compare with his equally questionable self-evident claim for Ramayana, and then that's the kind of discussion he will have when it comes to chronology. Now I want to quickly jump into the second part, which is against this type of claims for the chronology. We can actually look at the internal evidence from these texts, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, there are different types of evidence. There is geological evidence, there is a hydrological evidence, and any type of evidence you can have your hands on. And if we can test them in principle, we should actually go ahead and try do it. In this presentation, I'm going to look at specifically astronomy evidence. So if someone searches through the Mahabharata text, what you will find, and this is what I found, that there are more than 200 specific astronomy references. And I like to split them into two categories. The first category, okay, let's see. Okay, all right, here. The first category, I call it near-Earth phenomenon. What are these? These are observations of the phases and positions of the moon, planetary positions, and such. Now, they are near-Earth phenomenon because they recur very frequently. For example, the phase of the moon will occur every 30 days. The position of the sun near, say, a specific point of solstice or equinox will occur every year. On the other hand, there is another set of observations which I like to group under the effect due to the precession of equinoxes. Now, all of these observations can help us in determining the chronology or specific timing of these events. But especially the one on the left side in the blue, these are, I call them extremely deadly astronomy poison pills, and we will see why. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, which is Valmiki Ramayana. And again, I found more than 500 specific astronomy references in the text of Valmiki Ramayana. And again, I like to group them under the same two categories as the effect due to near-Earth phenomenon and also effect due to precession of equinoxes. And what we are going to do, what I'm going to show you is take one observation from this left side, one each from Ramayana, one each from Mahabharata, and show how that can be objectively tested and what inference can be drawn for the chronology of these epics. So quickly, what is the astronomy poison pill? Well, it is a fact, objectively testable, that creates crisp and clean, rational and scientific shield of extreme mathematical certainty against dogmatic, skeptical, or superficial claims for the chronology of ancient Indian history. Now, before I jump into these specific observations, I want to quickly describe the underlying phenomenon called the precession of equinoxes. Imagine yourself sitting under a night sky facing north direction. And if you continue to watch the sky for a long time or take a picture with a long exposure in your camera, you will get a picture like this. And what you're seeing is this center star, we call it a North Pole star, in our times is Polaris, at the center, which doesn't move much, and all the stars of the northern hemisphere will be seen going in an anti-clockwise direction around it and completing one circle in 24 hours. And each star creates its track, so we will say this particular star is walking ahead of this star. Now this is the scenario that we will see in the 24 hours. But there is another motion. The Earth's axis, where it points to in the sky, it is not steady. Well, it is steady over a short period of time. So by short period, I mean, say 1,000 years. Astronomically, that's a short period, or maybe 2,000 years. But where it points to, and that point is called the NCP, or North Celestial Pole, around which we see all the stars rotating. And if there is a bright star next to it, we call it a pole star. But this particular axis where it points to has its own motion, and it goes in a circle and completes one round in about 26,000 years. So what happens? Imagine we go back by 13,000 years, like half the cycle. And what we will find, so that is going back to say 11,000 BCE, 12,000 BCE, we will find the Earth's axis is no longer pointing towards Polaris, like in our times, but rather it is pointing towards Brahma Rashi or Abhijit, also called Vega. Different names, same star. So in 11,000 BCE, Brahma Rashi or Abhijit or Vega was our pole star and not Polaris. So that is the one consequence of this precession of equinoxes, that the pole star changes. And you can see that into this circle. So Polaris is our pole star. It will continue to be pole star for a few hundred years from now. But if you go backwards in 12,000 BC, again, as I said, Brahma Rashi was a pole star. And you can also see a few other stars which were our pole stars in the past. There is another consequence of this, and that is there are many consequences of precession of equinoxes. Another consequence is, which is relevant to what I'm going to show you, is that because the position of the North Pole changes, say two stars, how they look going around this North Pole relative to each other can also change. And so, as I said, every single astronomy observation can act as a poison pill, or at least a useful reference to determine the chronology. I'm going to take one example each from Ramayana and Mahabharata. Let's begin with Mahabharata. And I want to begin with this interesting observation called Arundhati-Vasishtha observation, AV observation. And I want to convince you that if this observation is true and made in Mahabharata times, then we can assert that Mahabharata war did not happen. Listen carefully, did not happen. It's a tall claim, people may think. Did not happen even a day late than 4508 BCE. So let's get into it. What is Arundhati-Vasishtha observation? It occurs in Bhishma Parva, 2nd Adhyaya, Shlok 31. The timing is just day before the Mahabharata war. And Vyasa makes a final attempt to see if he can avoid the war. He meets Dhritarashtra and he is telling various nimitta, various signs to Dhritarashtra. And he mentions very ordinary things, ordinary positions of moon and sun and planets and whatnot. But among that, he also mentions this interesting observation. Let's get into it. Ya chaisha visruta rajas trailokye sadhu sammata Arundhati tayapesha vasishta prushtata kruta. Quick translation is, well-respected Arundhati has gone ahead of Vasishta. And it is very clear from the context and otherwise that this is about the star pair, a well-known star pair, Arundhati and Vasishta, from the Saptarshi or Ursa Major in modern times, what we call in modern astronomy. What is interesting is that Vyas is telling Dhritarashtra that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. Now, why this is a big deal? Well, let's quickly see the background. And I want to set the background so that you appreciate the demystification of this observation. There are more than 130 plus researchers, Mahabharata researchers, who have come up with those many different dates. And out of that, only 4 even dare mention this observation. Now, 2 of them thought that it was inserted by somebody else afterwards. Now, why did they think this? They are Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya or Bharatratna Panduranga Vamankani. And they studied it for a long time and they felt astronomically this is impossible. This cannot occur. So that's why they thought somebody might have inserted it. In our times, Professor R.N. Iyengar, he was equally intrigued by this observation, but he couldn't explain. So what he tried to do, and still that did not work, he took this second line, Arundhati Taya Pesha Vasishta Prushtata Kruta, and tried to combine with another half line of another shlok from another adhyay of Bhishma Parva. Dhruvam prajulitam ghoram apasavya pravartate, and tried to make some sense out of it, and he couldn't. And the fourth researcher, Dr. P.V. Vartak. Now he is only one of the 4, or actually one of the 130. He somewhere intuitively felt that this was a empirical observation, a factual observation. And he tried to test it in 3 different ways and still failed. The reason I'm giving you the context to understand to make you understand the long history of this observation. Now, someone might say, you know what, these 120 plus researchers might have simply missed it because Mahabharata is big, 125,000 verses. Well, I will tell you that story does not sell. The reason is, in this particular adhyay, there are 4 specific astronomy observations, and all Mahabharata researchers refer to all 3 of them, but not this 4th one. And now you'll see why, because they simply could not explain it. So let's get into the explanation of it. Okay, so let's look at the relative positions of these stars. This is Polaris, our pole star. I am going to show relative positions of Arundhati and Vasishta. Keep in mind, they are exaggerated, spread out so that the demonstration is easy to see. But these are relative positions and they can be checked. So Arundhati, Vasishta with respect to Polaris. And keep in mind that all stars go around the pole star in an anti-clockwise direction. I will also point out where the position of Abhijit or Vega is. And then I will draw the circle. Now this is this circle of the precession of equinoxes, where the Earth's axis points to at any given time and completes one circle in 26,000 years. Now I'm going to draw a straight line that goes through Vasishta and Arundhati and cuts the circle at 2 places. This is very important. So these 2 points, we can use either mathematical calculation or astronomy simulations to find out exactly when this point was the point of North Pole. So I will call this point A and B, and they occurred in the year 4508 BCE and 11,091 BCE. What this line actually did is split the circle into three different phenomena as far as Arundhati-Vasishtha motion is concerned. So, if we consider the point of North Pole anywhere along this ACB, someone watching the sky from the earth will see Vasishtha walk ahead of Arundhati. If the point of North Pole is at either point A here or point B in 11,091 BCE, anyone watching the sky from the earth will see Arundhati and Vasishtha walk together, no one ahead, no one behind. And the third scenario, anytime the point of North Pole is along this AXB, and I have specifically chosen 5561 BCE, and you'll see why. But anywhere along AXB, anyone watching Arundhati-Vasishtha from the earth, northern hemisphere, would see Arundhati walk ahead of Vasishtha. And keep in mind, that is what Vyas is telling Dhritarashtra. Again, this is an extremely stable star pair. So let's see why that happens. So the first scenario, Vasishtha walking ahead of Arundhati, like we can see in our times. Here is our Polaris, the pole star. Here is Arundhati-Vasishtha, and I'm going to draw lines to make it easy for us to understand. These are the trajectories for Arundhati and Vasishtha around Polaris. They are going anti-clockwise direction. So you can say it that Vasishtha would appear walking ahead of Arundhati. We can quickly look at this simulation, astronomy simulation. The vertical line is the meridian, and Vasishtha would appear to walk ahead of Arundhati. Now this was the scenario, this is the scenario in our times. This was the scenario 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. That Vasishtha walking ahead of Arundhati. So if Vyas is saying otherwise, which is Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha, and if that statement is true, Shabda Praman, we accept it, then Mahabharata war did not happen in last 6,000 years. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. The second scenario quickly, when the North Pole is at A or B, we can draw the lines from there to Arundhati and Vasishtha. And notice that in both years, 11,091 or 4508 BCE, Arundhati and Vasishtha crossing the meridian at the same time. No one ahead, no one behind. And then the third scenario, this is the most important. I will draw the lines again to Arundhati and Vasishtha. Again, the motion is anti-clockwise. Now pay attention, not much difference, but you will observe Arundhati will appear walking ahead of Vasishtha. And we can do a quick simulation. Again, the vertical line is the meridian. The motion is from right to the left, anti-clockwise. Arundhati has already crossed the meridian. Vasishtha has yet to cross the meridian. So let's bring this together. Okay, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramanani of Patanjali, the scientific method, the logic of scientific discovery. We begin with the Praman, Arundhati walks ahead of Vasishtha. We actually empirically test it, like what I just showed you. That is Pratyaksha. Against the background of modern astronomy, precision of equinoxes and proper motions. That's our background knowledge, established knowledge, Agama. And the inference is that Mahabharata war did not happen even a day late than 4,508 BCE. Let me quickly show you the significance of this. That means it didn't happen after 4508 BCE. And this one observation is capable of instantly falsifying anything, any claim that falls after 4508 BCE. Okay, now of course someone is going to ask, but this is just one observation and this could be a random coincidence. Well, fortunately not. There are series of poison pills of it. In principle, each of these observations is capable of doing the same thing. But I'll quickly run to the second observation from Ramayana. Sun sets on Pushya during the Hemant season. And this allows us to set a lower limit of 11,000 BCE. Let's see why. In Aranyakand, Lakshman describes the position of sun setting on the western horizon during the Hemanta Rutu. He says, Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushyanita Himaruna, meaning the sun is setting on the western horizon near Nakshatra Pushya during this Hemanta Rutu. Now, that is, he is describing of the Ramayana times. During Hemanta Rutu near Nakshatra Pushya, we empirically test it with astronomy calculation against the background of modern astronomy, precision of equinoxes, proper motions, and the inference, Anuman, is that Ramayana did not happen anytime after 11,500 BCE. Now, what I just showed you, I did this for all the observations from Ramayana and Mahabharata, the astronomy observations. More than 500 in case of Ramayana, more than 200 in case of Mahabharata. Tested each of them, and that led me to the inference that Mahabharata Yuddha, Mahabharata war, occurred in 5561 BCE. Now, this claim is not my original claim. It was made by Dr. Vartak some in 1980s. Came from a very different perspective, how he arrived at this date. When it comes to Ram Ravan Yuddha or Ramayana time, I have come up with a date of 12,209 BCE. Now, that's my original. Now, if you want to know more about it, we can, of course, cover everything in 20 minutes. I would encourage you to read my books. The first book was published in 2011. When did the Mahabharata war happen? The second book, The Historic Ram, published in 2014. And I want to quickly end up with this emphasis in our Shastra on this Pratyaksha Anumana Agama Pramanani. So empirical proof connected with the inference against the background knowledge and how we arrive at better understanding. So this is from Samadhipad of Patanjali. But you can see this emphasis everywhere. Say, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, there is this emphasis of Pratyaksha Avagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam, or the emphasis on Atma Buddhi, trying to find out with your own intellect. Tatsukam Satvikam Proktam Atma Buddhi Prasadajam, or even Bhagavad Puran, you will see Atmano Guru Ratmaiva Purushasya Visheshata Yat Pratyaksha Anumanabhyam Shreyo Savanu Vindate. Like, with the help of Pratyaksha Anumana, you can be your own guru. And I'll end with a quote from Sir Karl Popper, where specifically he emphasizes also the role of experiment. And with that, I'll stop. I'll love to take any questions and respond to any objections.
It's terrific to hear your lecture. It's wonderful. But what happens if two astronomy poison pills contradict each other? I mean, let's say one is saying 4,500 BC and another is saying it has to be before 11,500 BC. In that case, if we accept one as a scientific fact, then how do we not accept the other also as a scientific fact? Thank you very much. Yeah, no, please let him put on the speaker. Yeah, now, yeah.
So the question is, what if two pieces of astronomy evidence from, say, the same book contradict each other? Well, I would say just a simple answer is imagine, think of this as a tennis match. So Federer versus another player, and if you look at the best of 5, and if you look at the total scored points for both players, you may find that a winner has a significantly higher number of points, but that doesn't mean the loser did not make any SS. The loser might have also scored few points. So I'll give you a quick score for both Ramayana and Mahabharata. In case of Mahabharata, I mentioned 215 astronomy observations. For my proposal, the score stands at 210 on my side versus 5 on the side which they either directly conflict with my date or appear to conflict with my date. And I have written in my both books, I have written a specific chapter, both of books, called Conflicting Observation, specifically discussing these observations and what can be done, how they can be corroborated, or what additional research needs to happen. In case of Ramayana, the total observations are 575 plus, and I would say the scores is somewhere like a 550 for my proposal to say 25 against 22 against my proposal, if that helps.
There is an inscription at Aihole, I think you are aware of it, Chalukyan inscription, which says 3101 when Kali era started. Kali era started at the death of Krishna. So it is almost at the end of Mahabharata. How does it compare with your dating? Either US is right and 3101 the inscription is wrong, and at that point of time even the astronomers of India were wrong, or whether this has been now compared with any scientist and we are able to accept your dating.
So the question is, there is our understanding in the Indian context that 3102 BCE was the beginning of Kali Yuga, and then beginning of Kali Yuga is connected with Mahabharata. So how does that fit with my proposed date? Here is what it is. For example, if you look at the entire Mahabharata text, the word Kali occurs 9 times. And actually none of it occurs in the sense of the Yuga that we are talking now, which is a later development in the Purana times and afterwards. And Aryabhatta refers to it and others. So if you take any reference or a combination of references from Mahabharata, it will not allow you to arrive at 3102 BCE. So quickly, where did we come up with this notion of 312 BCE and Mahabharata time? It is not in the Mahabharata. It comes from Bhagavad Puran, where the reference states, the 12th skanda, the reference states that when Krishna left the planet, actually the real reference says, it is been said that when Krishna left the planet, Kali Yuga began, and it says that is the opinion of Puravid, that is the opinion of history experts. So it is stated as an opinion. But again, the point is, so now what some people have done, then later on, astronomically, 3102 was decided as the beginning of a Kali Yuga for whatever reasons. And there is a lot of work. Lokmanya Tilak has written about it. Many others have written about it. We don't know the basis of where it started, 3102 BC. We do know that our modern calendars or even calendars going back to 2000 years assume that as a basis. Even Purana assumes that. So Vishnu Puran or Bhagavad Puran, we can infer that they were referring to 3102 BCE as the timing of Kali Yuga. But as far as Ramayana or Mahabharata are concerned, this whole concept of Kali Yuga and these millions of years of Yuga is simply not there.
In South India, especially in Tamil Nadu and Andhra and Karnataka, we used to actually refer the Panchang. As per the Panchang, introduction of the Panchang will start with the shloka. And in that, you can refer any of the Panchang. It is always says Kaliyabdam 5120 years, 5121 years like. There is a diary, it is actually maintained, and the diary is there, and 5120 years is there. That is the record is there. I'm referring that, you are telling that there is no any record. There is a record. It is there. They are mentioning that. So as per that record, it is 5120 years and 5200 years. There is a record. It's for your information.
I don't know if there was a question, but what I thought was a comment that said that there are Panchang in the South India, and it refers to this 5,100 or 200 years time period. I'm not specifically aware of the Panchang there, but say I have seen this Maharashtra or the term used Yugabda. So I'm aware of it. My point is, someone started this 3102 BCE for astronomical purpose or some other purposes. I don't know the answer, as the beginning of a Kali Yuga. I am not doubting that. I'm saying, in fact, that is the assumption of Vishnu Puran and Bhagavad Puran, and we can actually find the chronological timing, just like I did for Ramayana and Mahabharata, for Vishnu Puran, Bhagavad Puran, as at least around 1600, 1800 BCE. So even as far back as 1600, 1800 BC, there was this concept of Kali Yuga starting with 3102 BCE. So I'm not questioning that. What I am saying is, as far as the internal evidence of Ramayana or Mahabharata is concerned, there is no reference. And of course, if someone comes up and shows it to me, I would be very happy to look into it and we can have a discussion. But there is no internal reference from either Ramayana or Mahabharata that allows us to come to 3100 BCE as the beginning of Kali Yuga. So that could be another tradition that someone started at some point, just like there were many eras that were started. That was all my limited point I was making.
Nilesh, quickly related to this, you're probably aware of archaeoastronomy as talked by Dr. Narhari Achar, who mentioned about, if I remember right, 3072 BC or something, and he based it on, if I remember, the reference of Krishna talking to his charioteer when he was going to peace talk before the Mahabharata war. Any comments on that?
Have time. The date of not 3072, but Narhari Achar's date of 3067 BCE, 3067 BCE, and it was not his original date. It was originally proposed by Professor Srinivas Raghavan as early as 1969. And in recent times, maybe like say 15 years ago, Professor Achar claimed that he has verified it. And I would encourage you to go to my blog site. Now I showed you 215 references. Professor Achar refers to 150 astronomy references, be it as it may. But then he starts with 150. He does not tell us which 150. Then he narrows down to 40. Then he further narrows down to 12. He doesn't tell us why. But again, those 12 references, he claims that that's how the 3067 can be validated. I would encourage you to go to my blog site and just type Professor Achar or something like this. You'll see a 10-part series that I wrote a few years ago. What I have shown there is each of these 12 references that he claims, not only that will not allow anyone, either each reference or cumulatively all 12 together to arrive at 3067 BC, but actually each of that reference falsifies 3067 BC as the timing of Mahabharata war. And I have had communication with him, and there is this multiple forums, a lot of this discussion going on, including directly with him. But that is, and I would definitely encourage you to go and look at it.